Hello and welcome back to Wildcard Workshop. Today we're going to be looking at getting some of the targeting aspects of our virtual sentry system in place. What I'm talking about is the aspects of it where it's tracking how many players are in its effective area, deciding on a target. We might get to the part where we're actually telling the creatures about their targets, but we might need to do a little bit of experimentation with that and see whether or not we need to override the behavior tree in order to get that to work, or if the behavior trees that are already present will work for our needs. Now, for everything that we have changed for this episode, it's pretty much right here on this screen. Now, there's more in these functions here, but this is pretty much exclusively where we are working today. To get started, I've only added one new variable, and that is this target list. It is an array of primal character objects. You just add that. It doesn't replicate. We only want this being bothered on the server side. The client doesn't need to know anything about this list. At least not right now. That might change in the future if we run into any issues or we need to do something visually on the client side. But for now, server side only. So one thing that I ran into an issue as I was building this was I was getting some weird functions were being triggered twice, and I wasn't sure why. And then it dawned on me. These overlap functions will trigger on both client and server. We only want to bother with it on the server side though. So in front of both of them, I have added the switch has authority and branched off only on the authority path. We'll come back to this graph here in a moment. This is again just in our event graph. It's the same one before where we had the overlaps. It's just been changed a bit. So I've added some new functions. Okay. Now this first one is not actually being used right now, but I have added it as basically in case we need it in the future. It could prove to be a useful function. It was just something that popped into my head as I was working on this. What it does is basically rather than working on just the event to check for an overlap, this function will do it on, I'll call that overlap check. So it will allow me to basically, at any time that I'm not sure about the integrity of the target list or something like that, I can just call that function. It will check to see if X player is actually still in the target list, and if not, then maybe we can remove it or something like that. And all this does is for the player, we're going to call the component overlap actors, and basically we get our effective area component, which you'll find down here. We made that before. That'll be your component for this. The component transform I just put in as the root of the actor transform of the foundation itself, just to ensure that we're centering on that. For the object types, now these are basically just the same channels that we do for collision on the overlap component. That's basically how this works. And then actors to ignore, we just stuck the foundation itself into it as well. I could probably add all of the segments as well, but honestly it's not really going to matter because we're going to be checking to see if this particular player is in the list. So we're never going to be checking for the segment based on this function, so it doesn't really matter. And basically, if the player is in this list, then that means they are in our effective area. Simple enough. The next one we are using, basically this is a check to see if a given player is an enemy of the foundation. And we do this using the targeting team. Now there might be some errors in here. I haven't gone through any thorough testing, but just off the top of my head, this was what came to mind. This will be getting debugged and checked for accuracy as we go. But from this, you'll be able to see where I was getting at with it. So first thing I did was I grabbed the targeting team ID of the player that we want to check, and then the targeting team ID of this structure, the foundation itself. Do a check to see if they are tribe IDs. If they are, we're going to just save that notation as a bool in a local variable, and then also just save the ID also in a local variable, just so that I don't have to keep pulling off of the pins and stuff. So after that, after I've gotten that data for both the target player and for the structure, then we're going to start comparing them. First of all, if they're the same, then the simple fact is they're on the same team. End of story. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Who knows? I might be proven wrong. I haven't messed with targeting team IDs too much in my mods, so this will be sort of the first time I'm trying to dig into it. Now I've got a return value, local variable, vReturn. This is basically just what gets fed out at the end of the function. So because of all the branches, it was easier to just make a local variable and just set the state of that before going to that return node. So a value of false, based on the name of the function, is player enemy. False means no. So if they're the same, it's not an enemy. Now, if both of those IDs are tribes, then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the game mode, and then we're going to call this our tribes allied, because allied tribes won't have the same ID, but we don't want this acting on our allies. So we're going to do a check for that. And then if they are allied, we're going to invert it, because we want, if they are allied, this is going to return true, but if they're not an enemy, we want to return a false value. So we're just going to invert it with this not function right here, and then save that out to the return bool. And then if they are not tribe IDs, and they're not the same, then we're just going to assume they're an enemy. There might be some other conditions in here which are not, which make this inaccurate. We'll find out when we get to testing. And then I've added a couple new functions here. Eval for new pawn. Now this one gets called when a new actor has entered the, when a new character has entered the overlap area, the effective area. What we're going to do is we're going to do a check on if the player is an enemy, and we're going to check to see if our watch list already contains them. Now, that should never be the case, but if it is, we don't want to accidentally add them to the target list again. Okay, so if it's not an enemy, or excuse me, if the player is an enemy and they are not contained in the target list, then we're going to add them to the target list. And then, oh yeah, I was wrong. There was one other variable that we've added, although it's not really a fair, well, yes. I made an event dispatcher all the way down here called onTargetListChange. And all this is it has one input, which is an array of primal character called target list. Now, after we have added or removed anything from our target list, we want to call that. Now, the reason I made this is so that our buff, our VSS buff, can bind to this. And then without having to pull the foundation, the tower foundation, we can see when this list changes. And maybe, hey, somebody left the area. Okay, we need to update the target list of everything else, all of our creatures and such. Well, that can be done here without having to pull by using an event dispatcher. So every time we change this target list, we are going to call onTargetListChange and then provide the target list. And then anything that is bound to it, whether it be an external creature or a buff or whatever, it will get the new updated list. And then we basically do the reverse for eval for pawn leave, which is called here on the end overlap. Again, we check to see if the player is an enemy. If they are, and our target list does contain it, then we are going to remove them from the target list. And technically, I could probably actually remove this, because it's technically possible that an enemy could come into range and then become an ally afterwards before leaving, in which case we may want to remove this. We'll have to do some checks to see if that's how it's going to play out. But even if we do remove this, and let's say it's an ally, when we call the remove from our target list, it does return a bool telling us whether or not items were removed. So if they weren't in the list before and we try to remove them, it'll just return a false. And then, you know, the target list hasn't changed, so we don't need to call this. But if this has removed something from the list, it'll fire off on that true, and then we'll call on target list change again. Easy enough. Now, after these, now you remember our start combat state, we'd made this one before. I did make a small change. The gate here, or the branch on is in combat, I moved that out here. It is now part of this. We're going to say if we are not in combat and our target list is greater than 0, then we want to start our combat state. Okay. If we are already in combat, we don't want to start it again. We only want to start it if we're not already in combat. Well, this is all pretty much the same except for that movement from here to out here. And then for our end overlap, everything that was here before, I stuck in this end combat state function. So it's just a little bit easier to read and more consistent between the two states. So for this, we're going to branch on if we are already in combat and our target list is less than or equal to 0. It should never somehow be less than 0, but you know, it doesn't hurt to put that less than in there just in case something crazy does happen. But if it's less than or equal to 0 and we are in combat, then we want to stop combat state. We want to turn off all the combat, we want to turn off all the creatures. Just full stop. And then, like I said, this is everything that was in there before. Or everything that was out here before. So that is pretty much everything that was changed. Oh, right. And also, I put in a debug function. This was how I was debugging what was going on up here, where I was getting multiple triggers of these functions. And it was throwing me off because there were values that shouldn't have been the case, and I wasn't seeing up here on the top right the client server execution state for what instance it was, what world instance. So I wasn't seeing that it was firing on the client. But this was a debug function that helped me out. Don't worry about this. This note is not an error. I don't know. There was a bug that I was able to find on UE4. Something to do with using arrays as part of the event dispatchers, maybe only certain types of arrays. Either way, it doesn't seem to break anything. We might find out otherwise when we go to actually cook and upload to the workshop, but at least for now it doesn't. And if it does, we can just put this behind an is shipping build check, and then this won't matter. Or we can just remove this entirely. But what this does is we're going to bind to the on target list change. And then anytime it changes, we're going to grab the number of elements in the list, and then we're going to multicast it to all the clients and just do a print string. That way we can just sort of watch when the list changes and see how many are in there without having to throw up breakpoints or anything like that. So that accounts for just about everything. Now I'm going to go ahead and start up the play in editor. And what I'm doing to test all of this is we've got run dedicated server on, but I've set the number of clients to 3. It's going to bog down a little bit. Bear with me. You're also not going to be able to see 2 of the screens because they're going to be off on my other monitor. But you'll be able to see, I'll try to keep them in view on this main viewport. Okay, So here we go. I've set up. I've already made my creature crystal, put it into the tower and all that. You can see my other two over there. I will warn you, when you are doing play in editor with multiple clients like this, sometimes it can be a little bit unpleasant to deal with because it always seems like UE4 doesn't know which window you're actually trying to work with, and it can be a little bit frustrating at times. I don't know a way to fix that yet. But it is manageable. Mostly it's just when you like go into menus and stuff, it seems to like try to switch the active window. Oop. And again, I'm working with 3 active clients and a dedicated server all running right now. So there's going to be occasional moments where it hitches like this. And yeah, we're already back. So as you notice, if I move into the effective area, we do not see anything come up with the print screen. It's just all out here. Okay, we are an ally of this structure, so it's like, hey, I don't need to summon any creatures just because you're here. You're a friend, and all is good. But if I switch over to another client, and then we zip forward, whoop, there it is. And you can see up at the top left, sort of, server number of targets 1. And then if I bring over the other player, you'll see it again, server number of targets 2, but it did not summon another raptor, which is good. We don't want it to. We don't want it to duplicate for every person that comes into the effective area. Now, the question is, if I leave the area, does the raptor stay? It certainly looks like it. And then if I take out the other player, oop. If I take the other player out of the effective area, oop, number of targets 0, and then it might take a little bit for it to get down there. And there we go. Now it's despawning. And there goes our little raptor. Gonna have to look at the timing on the animation a little bit probably at some point. As you can see, it just kind of popped out before fully dissolving. But, you know, problem for another day. But that's it. So we've covered our sort of targeting list and filtering out the people that move into the effective area, whether they're friend or foe. So from here we can start giving direction to the creatures. We could start doing any number of things from this point involved with the targeting mechanics and choosing of targets and when and where to spawn creatures. We're starting to build out that framework and that infrastructure to be able to do quite a few things. We're not going to do all of them, though. We want to think about it carefully and decide what's most effective, what features are going to be worth putting in, what ones might actually make it worse of an experience. So you want to, when you start getting to this point where you've got a whole bunch of different ways you could go, take a step back, see whether or not it fits your original model. Again, check your design document, see what fits with it, what fits against it, play test some ideas, and see, if it's fun or not. We now have the infrastructure in place in order to get started on having the Sentry Tower really take care of managing the creatures and distributing commands to them about where to go, what to target. We could make this really simple where it's just, if they're in the area, attack the first person on our list, the people that were there earlier, or we could say, hey, if someone attacks the tower, switch all of our focus to that. Obviously, we would need to put some different checks in there to make sure that people can't just swap timing on attacking the tower to keep the monsters running between, or the dinos running between 2 points and never actually hitting anybody. But, we can manage that. It's just a matter of experimentation and deciding, what works well. So until next time, happy modding.